The seat leather was cold against her cheek and smelled like motor oil and sandalwood. That was the first thing Joelle registered before the rest of her senses caught up. The low vibration of a moving vehicle, the muted city sounds beyond tinted glass, and the sharp chemical ache lingering at the back of her sinuses from whatever they'd pressed over her mouth in the parking garage. Her wrists were zip-tied, front, not behind her back, a small mercy she categorized automatically, the way she categorized everything, practical, not meant to restrain violently, meant to keep her manageable. She was a forensic accountant. She wasn't supposed to be manageable in the back of an armored SUV. She pressed her tongue against the roof of her dry mouth and made herself breathe through the nausea. One thing at a time, she was alive. The vehicle was still moving. The man sitting across from her hadn't spoken yet. She looked at him. He wasn't looking at his phone the way people did when they wanted to appear uninterested. He was simply still. Forearms resting on his knees, eyes already on her, the way a person looks at an accounting discrepancy, patient, waiting for the number to confess. He was around 40, maybe older. Dark suit. No tie. Grey beginning at his temples, which should have made him look distinguished, but instead made him look like something that had been through several storms and hadn't bothered to explain itself. There was a scar cutting through the left side of his jaw, old and silver, the kind left by something precise rather than something frantic. "You're not her," he said. Not a question, not an accusation, a notation. Joelle's heart knocked against her sternum. She forced her jaw to hold steady. "I don't know who you think I am." Lark Whitmore. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a photograph. He held it out toward her between two fingers. She took it, her bound hands clumsy. It was a surveillance still, grainy, low light, taken from above. A woman entering a parking structure. Dark hair, narrow shoulders, wool coat. The posture was different. Joelle knew it the way she knew her own reflection. That woman walked like she was arriving somewhere. Joelle walked like she was calculating how quickly she could leave. "That's not me," Joelle said. "No." He took the photograph back. His eyes moved across her face in a slow, deliberate inventory. "She has a habit of twisting her watch when she's nervous. Counterclockwise, 3 turns. You've touched your wrist twice in the last 60 seconds. You were checking for a watch that isn't there." A pause. Different habit entirely. Joelle said nothing. "Where did you meet her?" he asked. "I went to college with her." The truth came out before she could stop it. She pressed her lips shut. The truth was probably the only currency she had left. The man, she didn't know his name yet, only that the driver had addressed him with silence, leaned back against the seat. He looked out the window. They were leaving the city now, the dense grid of lights dissolving into highway dark. "She gave your name to one of my contacts 8 months ago," he said, as a secondary reference for her professional background. "Said you were a colleague, an associate." His jaw flexed once. "I should have been suspicious. Lark doesn't have associates. She has tools." Joelle stared at him. The word tools settled into her chest, with the weight of something she already knew, but hadn't wanted to articulate. "My name is Joelle Quint," she said. "I'm a forensic accountant. I work for a due diligence firm on Clement Street. You can call my office in the morning. They will confirm I've been there for 3 years. I do not know what Lark has done or where she is. I haven't spoken to her in 4 months." "I know." The quiet confidence of it silenced her completely. "Lark has been building a cover story for the better part of a year," he continued. "She's thorough, detailed, establishing you as a shadow credential, something she could produce if pressed." He finally looked back at her. His eyes were the dark grey of a filing cabinet in a lightless room. "She also knows exactly how my men operate. She knows we watched the perimeter near her last known address. She knew we'd move on the first woman matching her description." He paused. "She left the description, Joelle. She left it somewhere she knew we'd find it." The floor of the SUV seemed to tilt. "She put me there," Joelle said. The words felt imprecise, insufficient for the thing they were describing. "She told you what I look like. She told you where I'd be." "Yes." The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. She had known Lark since their second year at State. They'd shared a dorm room that smelled of mildew and someone else's ambition. Lark had been magnetic and sharp-edged, and always slightly ahead of every situation, moving through rooms like she already knew the exits. Joelle had assumed it was confidence. She'd aspired to it. She'd thought for years that they were friends. She pressed her back against the door and stared at the partition between them. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "That," he said, "depends entirely on how useful you are." He picked up his phone from the seat beside him. "My name is Renard. You'll use it." The estate appeared at the end of a private road flanked by bare maples. It was enormous and old, and looked nothing like the headquarters of organized crime, which was probably the point. Stone facade, dark windows, the kind of house that appeared on historical registry lists. The gates opened without anyone touching them. Inside it smelled of wood smoke and lemon oil and, faintly, something metallic that her brain categorized and filed away. 3 men were waiting in the entrance hall. They straightened when Renard walked in. Their eyes slid to Joelle, and the effect was immediate and strange. Not recognition exactly, but a recalibration. Like they'd prepared for a specific weather system and gotten a different one. "Mrs. Whitmore," one of them said carefully. Joelle opened her mouth. She closed it. If she corrected him, she would spend the rest of the night explaining herself to men who carried guns and had no reason to believe her. Renard was still beside her, close enough that she could feel the temperature his body displaced. He hadn't corrected the record. He was watching her choose. She let the name land without acknowledging it. "I need a room," she said, "and something to eat. The carb-to-protein ratio of whatever you served last time was appalling, and I won't repeat the experiment." She had no idea what Lark ate. She was terrified. The words came out anyway, sharp and dismissive, and she watched one of the men blink and look somewhere else. She followed Renard up a wide staircase and kept her breathing even. The room was on the 3rd floor, crown molding, a window onto a dark courtyard, and a lock that engaged from the outside. The closet held clothes that weren't hers, tailored, expensive, in colors she'd never buy for herself. Charcoal, ivory, deep burgundy. She stood in the closet for a long time after the door was locked. She knew Lark the way you know someone you've watched closely for years. She knew Lark wore her opinions like jewelry, on display, easily exchanged. She knew Lark ordered sparkling water in rooms where she wanted to seem composed and whiskey when she wanted to seem dangerous. She knew Lark had a laugh that made people feel chosen. She did not know how Lark managed a criminal syndicate's financial infrastructure. She did not know who Renard's associates were, or what they were afraid of, or how Lark had spoken to them in 3 years of proximity. Joelle sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and did what she always did when the numbers didn't add up. She held the problem until it started to have shape. She was alive because Renard was using her. He believed she was Lark. He was wrong, and he half knew he was wrong, but he hadn't corrected the record downstairs. That meant he wanted her to be Lark, or wanted the appearance of Lark, for reasons she didn't yet understand. She needed to understand them before he stopped finding her useful. She stripped off her clothes and showered in scalding water and stood in the bathroom afterward, staring at herself in the fogless mirror. Same face as Lark, different expression entirely. She put on the burgundy blouse and told herself it was armor. Then she walked downstairs. Renard was in a study off the main hall, standing at a long table covered in documents. He didn't look up when she entered. "The Halverson Group," she said. He stilled. She crossed the room and picked up the invoice nearest to her. Cargo manifest. Falsified weight entries in the secondary column. Joelle had spent 3 years auditing exactly this kind of paperwork. She saw the error in 6 seconds. Someone's been invoicing for weight differentials on the northbound containers. It's not a rounding error, it's systematic. Whoever is doing it is extracting between 3 and 5% per shipment and making it look like port fees. She set the document down. "You've been losing money for at least 8 months. You probably already know this, and I'm guessing you think it was me." Silence. She turned to look at him. He was watching her with that filing cabinet expression. "Lark set it up," he said. "I know." She paused. "I'm saying I can find where it went. She met his eyes. That's what I do. Not what she did, what I actually do." He crossed the room slowly. He stopped 3 feet from her and studied her with the same patience he'd used in the car. "You've seen one invoice," he said. "I've seen the pattern in one invoice. Give me 12 months of source documents and 48 hours, and I'll give you names and account numbers." She kept her voice flat. Lark would keep her voice flat. More importantly, it was the truth. "Unless you'd rather keep hemorrhaging money while you decide whether to trust me." The silence stretched. "Conference room," he said finally. "First floor. You'll work under observation, and you won't sleep until you find it." "I wasn't planning to," she said. She found the first diversion trail at 2 a.m., the second at 4:15. By the time grey light was pressing against the courtyard windows, she had a partial map of 4 shell accounts, 2 jurisdictions, and a financial architecture that was elegant in the way that things built to deceive are always elegant, clean on the surface, hollow underneath. A woman named Ingrid brought her coffee at dawn. She was older, mid-60s, moving carefully, eyes down. "Thank you," Joelle said automatically. Ingrid froze. Her hands tightened around the tray. Joelle watched the reaction and understood it immediately. She'd made a mistake. Not dangerous yet, but visible. Lark didn't thank the staff. Lark probably didn't look at the staff. "Leave it and go," Joelle said, pushing her voice flat, "and don't bring the low roast again. It tastes like regret." Ingrid left without lifting her eyes. Joelle drank the coffee and hated herself in precise, measured increments. The problem with performing someone else's cruelty was that the person she was performing it for was watching everything. She knew Renard noticed. He sat across from her at lunch 2 days in, ostensibly reviewing her preliminary report, and she caught the moment his eyes paused on her face, rather than the papers. He set his pen down. "Lark doesn't read with her finger," he said. Joelle looked up. She hadn't realized she'd been tracking the column of figures with her index finger, an old audit habit, touching what you verified. "She was always faster on the page than in the room," Joelle said carefully. "She was never on the page. She delegated reading. She delegated most things." He watched her. "You've personally reviewed 63 pages of source documents in the last 12 hours. Someone had to." "Yes," he leaned back, "that's my point." The silence between them shifted into something neither of them named. He found the scar on the 4th day. She'd been reaching for a binder on a high shelf in the conference room when her sleeve slid back. The scar was a thin white line across the inside of her left wrist. A kitchen accident at 17, a poorly handled mandolin, 4 stitches and a lesson about attention. She hadn't thought about it in years. Renard's hand closed around her wrist before she could pull it down. He held it under the light. He looked at it for a long time, the way he'd looked at the photograph in the car. "Tell me where you got this," he said. She didn't answer. He let go of her wrist. He stepped back. He crossed his arms and looked at her with the expression of a man who had been operating on a provisional theory and had just received the data to close it. "Lark has no scars," he said. "She considered them a personal failure. She would have told me about a scar. She would have made it into a story." He tilted his head. "Who are you?" The room contracted. Joelle felt the walls and the locked windows and the distance from the city and the phone somewhere in Renard's desk drawer. She felt all of it at once. "I told you in the car," she said. He stared at her. "I told you," she said more quietly. "My name is Joelle Quint. I work on Clement Street. I went to Fairmont State on an academic scholarship because I'm very good with numbers and very bad at everything else." Her voice held through what felt like mechanical will alone. "She gave you my description. She left me somewhere she knew your people would look. She used me as a placeholder. Something to buy herself time." Renard said nothing. "She's been my friend since I was 19. Joelle said. The word friend tasted wrong now, like a term she'd been using for something that had never had an accurate name. I helped her move apartments. I covered her rent when she was between jobs. I thought... She stopped. I don't know what I thought. Renard walked to the window and stood with his back to her for a long moment. She's been planning this exit for approximately 14 months, he said. His voice was completely controlled. That was somehow the worst part. The offshore architecture you found, she built that. The weight diversions, she designed those too. She's been extracting from this organization for over a year and redirecting it into accounts that are now closed and emptied and invisible. He turned around. She needed a distraction. Something to occupy my attention while she completed the final transfers. She needed someone who looked enough like her to rattle this household and buy her 72 hours. Joelle looked at her own wrist. The scar was very small. Did it work? She asked. Yes. Something moved through his expression, not anger exactly, the specific exhaustion of someone who expects competence from themselves and received a gap instead. She's been gone long enough that the trail is cold. The money is moved. He looked at Joelle steadily. You, however, are still here. Are you going to kill me? She asked it the way she'd ask about a line item in a budget. She needed to know the number. No. He said it with no particular feeling. You're more useful alive. He walked to the table and picked up her preliminary report. 6 pages, handwritten notes in the margins, 2 discrepancies flagged but not yet resolved. You found in 12 hours what she hid from me for 14 months. I had the source documents. She wrote them to obscure. I know how she thinks. Joelle paused. She builds things to look more complicated than they are. It's a distraction technique, a beat. She did it in college. Apparently she never stopped. They had the conversation at midnight, in the study, with the fire going and a glass of water she didn't touch. Renard sat behind the desk. She sat across from it. It was a cleaner arrangement than the car, more honest about what they were to each other. The organization needs a functioning financial infrastructure, he said. What I have currently is a burned structure and a ledger that may or may not be accurate. It's not accurate. I've found 11 errors so far. Some are Lark's misdirection. 3 predate her, which means you have an older problem you may not know about. You could rebuild it. I'm not a bookkeeper, I'm forensic. I find problems, I document them. I don't run ongoing accounts. Can you learn? She looked at him. You're asking me to stay. I'm asking you to make yourself too valuable to remove. He held her gaze without apology. I have men whose livelihoods depend on this organization remaining functional, and a structural crisis that will become visible to rivals within the month. I need someone who can read the books without stealing from them. You don't know I won't steal from them. You just told me about 3 pre-existing errors you could have quietly kept to yourself. He paused. People who intend to steal generally don't volunteer the inventory before they're asked. She looked at the fire. The logic was clean. She hated clean logic when it trapped her. What do I get? She asked. Safety, resources, and when Lark surfaces, because she will, you'll be close enough to the center of this that she can't move without affecting you, which means we'll have advance notice. He paused. Her ego won't allow her to stay invisible. She built something here. She'll want to watch it unravel. Joelle thought about Lark's laugh. The way she'd laughed on the night she'd helped Joelle study for her CPA exam, pouring terrible wine and quizzing her from flashcards, saying, "You're going to be so good at this, Jo. You see the bones of things. You always see the bones." She'll come back to watch it burn, Joelle said quietly. She set up tests in college the same way. She'd leave and circle back to see what happened. She needs to see the outcome. She looked at Renard. She's not gone. She's waiting. I know. She knows I'm still here. Yes. She expected you to. Joelle made herself finish. She expected you to be done with me by now. The delay bothers her. She paused. That's actually useful. Renard was quiet for a moment. What would you have her do? Joelle thought about it the way she thought about audit trails, following the logic of a decision backward. to the original motive. She needs confirmation that the money is safe. The only way to get that confirmation is to contact someone still inside your organization. She met his eyes. If you identify who she might still be reaching out to and feed them false information, something she'd need to verify in person, you'd draw her in. Renard looked at her for a long, careful moment. Behind the controlled stillness, something shifted. Something closer to attention than anything she'd seen from him in 4 days. "The conference room," he said finally, "full access to the last 3 years of records. I need a proper workstation. The laptop down there can't handle the data volume." "Done. And I need to send one message to my office, telling them I'm taking a leave of absence. I'm not asking for outside contact, just enough to keep my job, which I would like to have when this is over." She held his gaze. "Because this will be over eventually." He nodded once. "Write it. I'll review it before it's sent." She stood up. At the doorway she paused. "I'm not her," she said. "Not as a protest, just as a fact she needed in the ledger. Whatever she told you, whatever she built here, I'm not that." "No," Renard agreed, looking at the fire. "You're considerably more inconvenient." She went to bed and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep. 3 days later, a package arrived at the estate's service entrance. Renard brought it to her in the conference room himself, which told her something about the contents before she saw them. He set a small craft envelope on the table beside her workstation and didn't open it. She did. Inside was a single item, a crumpled receipt from the coffee cart 2 blocks from her office. Medium drip, 2 sugars, her usual order, date stamped the evening before she was taken. Lark had been there, watching her buy coffee, watching her walk to the parking garage. Written on the back in the narrow left-leaning script Joelle had seen on birthday cards and shared grocery lists for 8 years. "Still counting someone else's money, Joe?" The conference room was completely silent, except for the soft hum of the workstation. Joelle carefully set the receipt on the table. She smoothed it flat with the heel of her palm. "She's not gone," she said. "No," Renard said. "She's close." "Yes." Joelle looked at the handwriting, at her own name, written in her oldest friend's hand, sent like a blade through a mail slot. A greeting, a taunt, a reminder that Lark had been near enough to touch her and had chosen instead to watch her get dragged into a car. She turned the receipt face down. "Tell me everything she built here," she said. "Not just the financial architecture, the relationships, the contacts, the leverage she held over people and what she knew about each of them." She looked up at Renard. Her voice was very steady. "If she's going to come back and burn this down around me, I want to know exactly what's flammable." Renard studied her for a moment, patient, precise, that same waiting quality he'd had in the car when he was watching her choose. Then he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. And he began to talk.